From years of anxiety to warrior and mentor, Bradley Robinson created the Anxiety Project to help you end your anxiety naturally. Let's mold the new you and let's end anxiety together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Anxiety Project podcast. Welcome to episode 338. I'm Brad Robinson, and today we are diving into the cycle of addiction. Very important because you may not even realize you're addicted to something, and I hope that this episode shines a light on something that's unconscious within you, and maybe it's something that you can work on and change and thus better your life. Now, the underlying theme of this podcast topic is pornography, right? I'm going to use that as the main subcategory of this episode because pornography is so prevalent and it's such a powerful addiction. Even if you aren't addicted to pornography, this episode is going to relate to you because I'm talking about just this basic cycle of what it means to become hooked onto something and not being able to get yourself out of it. That's really what addiction is. When you try to stop, you just can't stop. You are tyrannized by a sub-personality, and it has its hands, it has its grip over you, like you're the puppet and this thing is controlling you. And it's interesting how it's coming from within us. So yeah, you might not be addicted to pornography, but this episode will be a powerful one for you because you will connect with something, and maybe an addiction that you're unconscious of will come up. And you'll be like, oh God, I got to work on that thing. Yeah, I don't have a grasp over that. And, I have my fair share right now. Believe me, we all do. So I think the best way to start off this episode is to just summarize addiction. I'm going to play a clip from Dr. Anna Lemke talking about the parts of our brain that become, hooked on the certain thing that that is tyrannizing us. But it's interesting that most of us, we live in a bubble, and I do too. I get caught up in this bubble. Our basic needs are met. We're living comfortably. We have a stable and safe job. The things in our family life are consistent, and we get bored and then we latch on to something. We latch on to the television, we latch on to the Instagram, we shop. That's my thing, is like unnecessary shopping that, and going on Instagram or Facebook. And the thing is, Carl Jung said this: we don't find God because we're not looking low enough. We're not looking low enough. It's interesting how when suffering does come up, when something that tests us and opens our eyes to our mortality and how limited we are in this universe, we get injured or there's a health crisis with you or a family member, we then turn to our internal resources to manage that overarching conundrum, existentialism, which is, how do I deal with the unknown and being mortal? And then we tend to find God. Then we tend to find peace when we learn how to surrender to the biggest stressors of our lives. And it's in deprivation, it's in the pain and suffering we truly find those resources to deal with the stress. And a lot of us, like myself, I'll turn to, in my past, specifically pornography and drugs, alcohol. Nowadays, I can easily turn to shopping. That's one for me. And I have to keep myself in constant alert. But also, well, I'll get into this later, how we can overcome it, how we can move past this and prevent ourselves from falling into the habits that we know are toxic in our lives. But I feel like these things tend to get us the most when we are living comfortably. And even when we're living comfortably, we're in pain because we're not feeling fully satisfied. Dostoevsky says it best in his book Notes from Underground, where the main character is describing kind of the human condition, right? He's talking about how when we get everything that we want, when we live in that bubble, when we get all the pleasure and satiation, we tend to smash it to the ground just so something interesting can happen. It's like we are desirous for the unknown. We want to be in the unknown, even though it is a stressful place to be. And if you enter the unknown involuntarily, then that can really ramp up your stress response and shake you into a very unpleasant place. But you want to approach the unknown voluntarily with the right tools, right? You want to not carry so much baggage into that unknown because you won't be able to handle it. So like when the unknown pops up now for me, it's still stressful, it's still anxiety provoking, but it's not as burdensome or daunting because I'm very familiar of what the unknown feels like than how I was back in my 20s when I was suffering from panic attacks. I was suffering deeply from health anxiety and agoraphobia. So addiction can range from alcohol, drugs, phone use, shopping, eating, your thoughts, pornographic images in your mind, pornography on the computer, sex. So these are high stimuli that keep you craving and they keep you in a sense of lack. Like I'm not fully there, that I need to attain that again. That it'll be great once I get that thing, because dopamine is the craving, motivational, neurochemical, right? And also, addiction can be overworking yourself, at your job, or negative relationships, or just trouble, just getting yourself into trouble, gossip, negative friends, like I already said that. And this is because your normal world is not enough. Your regular world, it's boring, it's mundane. But I think now that I've gone through anxiety recovery, you I've noticed that I can take the unknown and apply it into my life in very healthy ways. Like I know this may sound cheesy for all of you out there who are, running around, going crazy, going to parties, alcohol, drugs, things like that. But I mean, like just going out to a coffee shop, bookstore, getting a new book that you're unfamiliar with, or that's a little bit challenging for you, getting into that, getting into meditation routines, or, shutting off the electronics and introducing certain kinds of peaceful music, hikes. These things helped me come back down into a very calm and centered place. We have to find the sacred places in our lives. We can't function without it. It's just simple. If you don't have a special sacred place that you can turn to, where else are you going to turn? That's where you're going to turn to alcohol and television and your phone, pornography. And here's a great quote from Dr. Anna Lemke. The reason we are all so miserable may be because we are working so hard to avoid being miserable. Are we willing to face short-term pain for long-term freedom? So the short-term withdrawal, or the short-term, separation from the caffeine, from the cigarette, for long-term health. Because the thing about someone who's smoking, and I see this all the time, I'll talk to a client, for example, and they know that underlying the smoking is a fear of being diagnosed with something because they know it's unhealthy. So when they're smoking or when they're eating junk food, and then say they get a rash or an illness and they have to go see their doctor, their fear is so much greater because they know in the back of their mind they're engaging in habits they know to be unhealthy. They know will cause some sort of damage to them in the long term. And that's when their health anxiety goes through the roof. Oh yeah, I'm definitely have it this time because when the dragon pops its ugly head, the human mind can't help itself to map out how they've gotten to the place that they're at, how this illness came to be. You know that when you get the common cold, you start mapping out oh yeah, I could have got that from Jenny at my work or the subway. Someone was coughing on the subway. Your mind always tries to map where it stemmed from. And so a lot of that's amazing to think about and to hold on to. When you separate yourself from the addiction, what tends to happen is you feel confident, you feel healthier, you feel lighter, you feel better physically, mentally, because you're not relying on the addiction to make yourself feel good or to relieve yourself from some sort of pain and suffering. But you're also going to build confidence that you're going to live longer and healthier because you feel good, but also because you're not doing that thing that in the back of your mind, could prevent some serious issues down the road. Now, I'm going to play a clip right now from Dr. Anna Lemke on the side effects and the link between pain and pleasure from specifically porn addiction. So here we go.
So one of the most interesting findings in neuroscience in the past 75 years is that pleasure and pain are co-located in the brain. So the same parts of the brain that process pleasure also process pain, and they work like opposite sides of a balance. So when we do something pleasurable, we tip one way, painful, it tips the other. But one of the overarching rules governing this balance is that it wants to be level, which scientists call homeostasis. It doesn't want to be tipped for very long to the side of pleasure or pain. And our brains will work very hard to restore a level balance after any deviation from neutrality. So let's say, after an orgasm, and an orgasm releases a whole lot of dopamine in the brain's reward pathway, we get this tip to pleasure. But no sooner has that happened than our brains adapt to increased dopamine by downregulating our own dopamine receptors and our own dopamine production, not just to baseline level, but below baseline level. That's the come down, right, or the after effect. I imagine that as these little neuroadaptation gremlins hopping on the pain side of the balance to bring it level again, but they like it on the balance, so they stay on until we're tipped an equal and opposite amount to the side of pain. That is that moment that we experience right after the intense pleasure. And initially in our forays with pleasure in all its various forms, we might not even notice that come down. It might be outside of our conscious awareness, but it's there. And it's the price that we pay for every pleasure. It's the way the brain restores homeostasis. Whatever the initial stimulus is, it first tips an equal and opposite amount to the other side before going back to level. That's also true for painful stimuli. When we exercise, we press on the pain side of the balance. Those gremlins hop on the pleasure side, and we feel good. That's a runner's high, right? And then they hop off and we restore homeostasis. So that's the fundamental rule. Now let's get into what happens with the addicted brain. With repeated exposure to the same or similar reinforcing stimulus, that initial response gets weaker and shorter. That is, the dopamine release gets less, but that after response gets stronger and longer. In other words, those little gremlins start to accumulate and they start to get muscles, right? And pretty soon we end up with enough gremlins on the pain side of the balance to fill this whole room. And then we're in what is called a dopamine deficit state. And the gremlins, if we do it enough, they camp out there. They're sort of living on the balance. That means when we're not using, right, we're walking around in a dopamine deficit state. We're experiencing the universal symptoms of withdrawal from any addictive substance, anxiety, irritability, insomnia, depression, craving. Other things are less enjoyable, right? Other things that used to give us pleasure no longer do. And now we need to keep using, not to even get high, but just to feel normal and restore the balance. And it is this dopamine deficit state, that overwhelming physiology to want to restore homeostasis, which drives the addicted brain and drives repeated use, and explains also why we need more of our drug and more potent forms, for example, more deviant forms of pornography over time to get the same effect, or more deviant fantasies. We started out with a kind of like a generic fantasy, and now we've got this kind of crazy stuff going on, right, in our heads. And it's all those gremlins we're at war with the gremlins, just trying to get more and more to create, homeostasis.
So that's pretty amazing. We try and get more and more just to reach back to this homeostasis, just to feel normal again. And it's interesting that when we separate ourselves from the substance of choice, the pain pleasure seesaw tips down, and the pleasure side and the pain side goes up. And that's what she's talking about here, is the dopamine deficit place. Now, hedonism leads to anhedonia. Anhedonia is the inability to feel pleasure. We're going to experience some withdrawal symptoms, but it takes a couple weeks to a month to fully overcome that certain withdrawal, depending on the substance. If it's pornography, it may take up to a month, depending on how powerful the dopamine kicks really are. If it's caffeine, it might take you a week, it might take you a few days. So it depends on the substance, but it's interesting that when we experience this lack, when we don't do it for a certain amount of time, we're going to feel irritable, like she said, anxious, and we're going to get frustrated. We might lash out on the people around us. So think about it. The more you engage in this super pleasurable habit, the more the original super pleasurable experience that led you to the consistency, that diminishes, right? So when we first engage in something really exciting and pleasurable, we're like, wow, I want to get more of this. But then when you keep trying to get more and more and more of it, it seems like it's not as pleasurable. And what happens is our tolerance to that thing increases, and the brain sort of becomes accustomed to it. But then the brain is getting more frustrated over time because, well, we've conditioned it to seek this out in order to feel normal, because our normal is then that experience. That experience was just this fun moment in our life, but if you keep adding that daily in your life, then that experience is just normal. And then everything else, just the simple things in your life, are just irritating. Imagine that. Imagine the simple moments of your life. It's just obstacles. It's an obstacle, like your children being around you, but all you want to do is watch something, or go online and shop for something, or go do your drug of choice or the alcohol, whatever. And the children get in your way and you take it out on them because, well, you're going to treat them as obstacles. Obviously, whatever's standing in your way from you getting to that thing is going to fire off some sort of anger and frustration. Makes sense. So, and now, as you engage in the super stimuli every single day, you'll push forward, doing whatever you can to recapture that amazing high you got one day when you got lost in a movie. You smoked some weed and you had this perfect night where everything was aligned, and then you just can't seem to get back there. The next time you do it, you feel frustrated or antsy, or you can't get to that place that you remember it being so magical, I guess you can say. So the more you have of something material, so sex, drugs, video games, the more you will feel a sense of lack and meaninglessness over time. That's scary, right? That's scary. So as you continue to do this, the meaning diminishes and you'll end up, well, running through time and missing out on all the simple things in your life. So let's talk about the 7-step sequence to looking at pornography. Now, this comes from a great book that I read earlier in the year called The Porn Myth. I highly recommend it if you are struggling with pornography specifically. But these 7 steps will help you in anything, well, to identify pretty much any addiction. And so the first step in this sequence is the trigger, the stimulus. So this initiates the activation sequence. So an obvious trigger for someone who's addicted to pornography would be a beautiful woman on the street, or a stimulating magazine cover or advertisement, a erotic, sex scene in a movie or TV show, a woman on the street wearing something provocative, or there's some not so obvious triggers. Could be sickness. And I've had a client who relapsed. He was going weeks on nofap, which is no pornography, no masturbation, and he got ill with a cold and a flu, and he relapsed. And I thought that was interesting. And at the end of our conversation, we determined that it was because of the sickness and and just this overall gloominess of how he was feeling that triggered, because he would tend to use pornography as a way to deal with stress. And, he was dealing with stress with this flu. So the flu triggered his desire to watch pornography. Very interesting. Or it could be a stressful day at work. So any stress, really. Any high stress. Or boredom. Or it could be because someone left the house and that's your trigger. Being alone is your trigger to do it. And so we have to turn on the prefrontal cortex, so this thinking part of our brain, to counter the stimulus. So why does this pathway lead to a bad outcome? That's what we have to think about when dealing with addiction. Why does this pathway lead to a bad outcome? The addiction brain is running irrationally. It's irrational. And so the irrational brain is important to engage with in order to sort out what the irrational brain is doing and thinking. So the second step in this sequence is emotional response. So a sense of excitement will arise within you, curiosity. You'll entertain certain images in your mind, the anticipation, the craving. So it's a feeling, right? It's like this, ooh, you get that, funny feeling in your gut, or that excitement. I get it up here in my chest, where my heart is. It's that, ooh, that'll be nice to engage in. So what will satisfy this craving? What's going to satisfy this? And because something triggered a specific thing that leads to a specific outcome. So, and also what's going to satisfy this, what's going to relieve this stress? Well, whatever's worked before. Because if you're in a stressful state and something triggered your need to watch pornography or take some sort of drug or alcohol, you're like, oh, this worked before. That's going to make me feel good. And there's going to be a sense of relief. That's the thing. You're going to feel like, okay, that'll help. That'll help. And then the third step in the sequence is the first thought. And it comes simultaneously with the emotion. So the thought will be, yes, that'll do it. That'll help. How can I get this right now? And And what you need to do is you need to activate the rational brain. And you need to think, well, I feel frustrated and I'm relying on this thing to numb, soothe, and distract me. Okay. And what's important in this step is you're going to have some sort of reference to good and evil. And I'm dead serious about this because when I was overcoming pornography addiction, it was Jordan Peterson describing pornography that really cemented in a great rational narrative to help me from engaging in pornography, where he was talking about how Peter Pan, who is king of the lost boys in Neverland, who doesn't want to grow up, has Tinkerbell, this pornographic fairy, fluttering around his imagination, and she's not real, and he's entertaining the thing that's not real, and that's keeping him in a very childlike stage in his development. And I feel like when I think about that story, I'm like, yeah, do I want to engage in this thing that's going to keep me from me dealing with this in a very mature and adult like manner? Because I view pornography as a thing that needs to be separated once you hit a certain age. Like, you can't really grow up unless you have some grip over pornography. I really don't think you can, because it, like I said, these things are gremlins. They're childlike sub-personalities that pull us towards something, and we don't have a grip over them. And also another great narrative is Pinocchio. When I say don't have a grip, I think of Pinocchio being controlled by the puppet master. And so when I have a desire to watch porn, which I still do, by the way, I think of, do I want to be a puppet to this thing? Do I want to remain king of the lost boys on Neverland, always turning to what's most convenient, the fairy of porn, rather than dealing with reality, dealing with the real woman, dealing with, my own true pain and suffering, and my the uncomfortable feelings that do come along with the craving? I want to transcend that. I don't want to be a slave to that. So having a narrative, and also I'm going to get into it, but I have more biblical references that have helped me overcome pornography addiction. But we're going to move on to number 4 now before I do get to more of those references. And I don't want to say references exactly, even though it is a helpful term. I just want they are narratives that do support me. But anyways, I can't think of a better name than references, to be honest. Number 4 is the chemical release. The chemical release. So this is the dopamine. As you progress towards the goal, the body gears up for the reward by releasing dopamine. The anticipation, motivational neurochemical. You're walking down the same road where you got your fix the last time, and the brain goes, yes, yes, this is great. It's like it gives you some sort of purpose, right? The feeling is of purpose. Yeah, I got something worthwhile to do. But is it worthwhile? Is it worthwhile? That's the thing. Or is it going to keep you craving? That's another thing that has helped me in my recovery, is asking that question. Well, once I get it and I obtain it, and then at the end of it, will I want it again? And it's like, yeah. So then I say, well, what's the point of doing it now? Isn't the feeling of guilt and shame worse by the end of it? And for me, it's yes. That feeling is worse. Number 5 is body language. So I was talking about this before. Whatever or whoever gets in my way will irritate me in proportion to how important the goal is. They act as an obstacle, so you get annoyed and self-centered. You think about yourself and you don't care about anyone else, and you lash out on anyone or anything that gets in your way. Also, you're in an aroused state. Your heart is beating fast, you're perspirating, you begin to rush and move quickly in the direction of your goal. Your muscles tighten, and then you get those butterfly feelings. It feels good. It feels good. But at the end of it, like I said, I've attained many, many things from these feelings, and they never satisfy me. I never get to the end. What is the end? It's the wanting. It's the wanting that's most addictive. You think, well, I just want it now. I want it now. It's like, trust me, you're going to get it and then you're going to want it again. So what are you really addicted to? It's the motivation. It's the journey towards the thing. Number 6 is the battle. So at this point, the decision to watch pornography needs to be made, right? So we ended up with the butterfly feelings. The dopamine is lighting up our brain. We're moving towards the thing. Our brain is saying, yes, let's go get it. Let's go get it. This is going to be great. You're anticipating it. And well, you this is where you can make up your mind whether to engage in pornography or not. And now you can build this pro versus con list. And this is only if you are in the middle of battling it, because now it's like you either do it or you don't. This is the stage, right? Like number 6 is you either do it, or if this is something you really want to quit, you don't. And now we get to really talk about more of those references, like biblical references that I was talking about earlier. I would typically say to myself, well, I hate the power that this addiction has over me. And then you'll want a narrative to help make clear why this habit is not serving you. So the Peter Pan story is useful. Pinocchio and him going to Pleasure Island is very useful. Bilbo Baggins in the Shire, how he journeys away from what's comfortable and what's satiating. You know, he has all the bread and all the food and alcohol that and safety that one could ever ask for, but he decides to take on real responsibility and venture out of the safety that he inhabits. And also having a clear understanding of good versus evil. The Bible helped me strongly with this, how Satan is the wanderer of the earth. Satan is the wanderer, which means Satan is in the material world, because God's up there. Jesus is up there in the spiritual realm. We look up, we point ourselves upward, we aim high towards the ideal. The material world is here, and we attain and we grasp on the material world, drugs, alcohol, video games, items that we collect in our homes, and they don't satisfy us. And Satan is within the material world. So this helps me think like, okay, is this thing material? Yeah, Satan is in there. I know it's a little cheesy, but not really. No, it's not cheesy at all. It's true. Satan is because Satan is what possesses you, is it not? Are you not possessed by a subpersonality? Are you not possessed by an addiction? Is this thing not controlling you? You can't seem to stop and move beyond it? You tried to stop, right? But you can't seem to. And even the thing is, I recently went to Italy, and I had cappuccinos. I don't drink coffee. I didn't then, and I drink decaf, so caffeine specifically. And then when I returned home, I drank caffeine here, but then I was like, you know what? I got to get back to the decaf. I got to get back to no caffeine. I was starting to feel a little anxious and, you know, like, I don't want to say flustered, but I was getting like revved up often from the caffeine. So I went another day. So the next day I cut it out. And then I was like, oh my God, I really want that coffee. And I was like, what is that? It's like, what is that frustration? What is that need and desire? It's like, oh my God, that thing is alive. That thing is like pulsating energy within me that's real. It's real and it's craving and it wants it. And it's not thinking about anything else but that thing. So that's what I mean is you don't, until you decide to not engage in that habit at that certain time, a certain place, with a certain people, it's going to, like Dr. Anna Lemke said, you're going to feel some sort of withdrawal. And then number 7 is the behavior. Now, this is when you lose the battle, right? So number 7, we're going to talk about some strategies. So you lose the battle, you engage in the behavior. And now the first strategy is to understand why pornography is robbing you of your potential. What is it doing to your relationships? What is it doing to your work life, your brain? Is it taking away precious time? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel like you have to hide it from people? Because for me, pornography is interesting where you have to use up a lot of mental energy to hide it, to cover it up, or to lie about what you've been up to. And that's just not good. Like you don't realize how emotionally demanding it really is until you sit with yourself and answer these questions. Number 2, what can you replace porn with? Very interesting. For me, what would trigger it is when people left the house. So I would go to the coffee shop, get a book. I would go to the library. I'd go out for walks. I would constantly listen to my role models who support nofap and overcoming pornography. Surround yourself with those people, man, and you'll be well on your way. Number 3 is finish the fantasy. I love this one. So think of you're craving pornography. Think of what the outcome will be. So you finish, you imagine yourself, you go on the computer, you do your business. At the end of it, oh man, I feel guilty. Oh, I feel frustrated. I feel ashamed. I feel a sense of lack. And then I feel like I don't know what to do with my time right now because all my mental resources was pushing me towards this goal of the day. And now that the goal is attained, there's this frustration of now what to do with myself and kind of floundering around in my day to day. But, typically it would be the guilt that would be the most painful of that fantasy. And then the fantasy will make me not want to engage in it because it's not worth it at the end of the day. It's not worth it. So number 4 is website blockers, doing what you can to block the site and, go on the computer or phone that you tend to watch it on and, set up some sort of thing that'll get in your way, an obstacle, and then you'll have more time to make the decision to not watch when you set those barriers up. Number 5 is back up your new morally just identity with habits that serve this view. So read more, surround yourself with online positive role models who are going through recovery, attend church, go to the gym, just build on a new identity. And so lastly, I'm going to sum up everything. Well, sort of, but I'm going to go back to the beginning and talk about more of how we are a slave to this sub-personality. So this tyranny is alive. It's real within you. It has power over you. It pulls your strings. And I'm going to read you a passage from Genesis 12, 1-3. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will shew thee. So God is, so Abram is, very old, living in his father's tent. We can think of the Peter Pan type character playing video games, eating Chinese food in the basement, right? And then this voice within him, a sign from God, comes and says, you should get out of here. Go on an adventure. That's the Bilbo Baggins story, right? Let's get out of here, go on an adventure. Now, the reason I'm bringing up this passage is because pornography becomes, or whatever addiction it is, it becomes your normal. And the adventure of your life is to separate yourself from what's normal. And it's going to be a difficult adventure, but you're going to look back on this adventure with pride, and you're going to be grateful on where you are now in your life. And you're going to feel motivated to help other people, because the passage goes on and says, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So what are you addicted to? Shine a light on that, and go back, re-listen to this podcast, write down these questions, and ingrain this information. Hope you're writing notes, because we need to really take this seriously. And for me to show myself that I'm serious is to, sit down, write things out, treat it seriously. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Please leave a like, and please take a moment and review this podcast on Spotify. It'll help branch this podcast outwards towards other people who are suffering and struggling. And thank you again. Rise above anxiety. I'll see you next time. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. Make sure to go to unpluganxiety.com and check out my anxiety recovery program. Everything that worked for me, I include in this program, including a releasing trauma exercise, meditations, a journal where you can plan and face the fears that you're not realizing that are hidden within the unconscious mind. Everything that you do in this program is unraveling the unconscious and all of the underlying fears and limiting beliefs that are holding you back from reaching your truer self. Go check that out. What are you waiting for?